At the time of the founders, they thought slavery was a dying institution. But in the 19th century, that had changed. They now began to talk about slavery as a progressive institution. And why not? As George Fitzhugh, one of the principal pro-slavery propagandists, argued, isn't slavery the same thing as what we are reading about among European socialists? What else is slavery, Fitzhugh argued, but a practical form of socialism?
Fitzhugh even tried to sell his idea to black leaders. He defends slavery as an early form of the welfare state. Fitzhugh argues that in slavery, unlike in capitalism, the slaves who cannot provide for themselves are looked after from cradle to grave.
If you took the logic of that argument, the idea that the slave plantation is a kind of extended family, that from each according to his abilities to each according to his need, Marxian principle, that this was not only an excuse for enslaving black people, but there was nothing in the logic that prevented you from enslaving a white guy.
Why not enslave white people, or at least reduce them to an economic status little better than that? Why not also extend slavery into the northern free states? Lincoln thought he discerned the hand of a plot here.
Would it be accurate to say that one of the key differences between the Republican and the Democratic Party is that the one party is founded on the idea of keeping the fruits of your labor, and the other party is founded on the idea we get to take your stuff either for our own use or because we've got some other better use for it?
That became the credo of the Democratic Party.
The great opponent of the Democratic plantation was Abraham Lincoln. In a phrase, Lincoln described the evil of slavery at its core.
You toil and work and earn bread, and I'll eat it. Whenever I hear someone arguing for slavery, I feel a strong impulse to see it tried out on him personally.
Lincoln ruthlessly exposed Democratic hypocrisy.
Wolves devouring lambs, not because it is good for their own greedy maws, but because it is good for the lambs.
For Lincoln, the fundamental sin of slavery, curiously enough, was not its racial aspect. That comes after. The fundamental sin of slavery is theft, because it says, you work, you toil, I will take the proceeds of that. And Lincoln's great anxiety was to point out how Northern Democrats had conspired together with Southern Democrats to promote justifications of taking away the fruit of other people's labor.
Guelzo is exposing the progressive strategy of blaming slavery on the South. The Northern Democrats were in league with the Southern Democrats, making slavery the sin not of the South, nor of America, but of the Democratic Party.
Northern Democrats were fully as complicit in this as Southern Democrats.
The powerful New York Democrat Martin Van Buren applied the idea of rural plantations in the South to urban centers in the North. When new immigrants came to America, they were poor, insecure, desperate. Some came as indentured servants. Like the slave populations in the South, they were a vulnerable people. Van Buren created an army of big city bosses, like Boss Tweed, who ran Tammany Hall in New York City, who would raid the treasury and use the money to create a patronage system that would keep immigrant populations collectively dependent on and voting for the Democratic machines, like in this scene from Gangs of New York.
Welcome to America, son. Your long, arduous journey is over. Go back to your own country. Move Germany! America more!
So before the Civil War, the Democrats' majority status depended upon rural plantations in the South and urban plantations in the North. Lincoln warned that the goal of the Democratic Party was to turn all of America into a plantation. To stop Lincoln, the Democrats went to war. Lincoln won the war and demolished the old Democratic plantation. Republicans took steps to integrate former slaves into American life, to create for the first time a multiracial democracy. Republicans pushed through 3 landmark constitutional amendments, freeing the slaves, guaranteeing the right to vote, and securing equal rights under the law. The Democrats overwhelmingly opposed all 3, and these were the Northern Democrats. The Southern Democrats had not yet been let back into the Union. The Democrats needed a new enslavement strategy and someone to implement it. Democratic President Woodrow Wilson knew the national government had defeated the old slave plantation, so he and other progressives wanted a new plantation system ruled by the national government, so it would last forever. Wilson's first step? Federal segregation. He forced his departments to establish separate workstations and restrooms for blacks. Wilson's second step? Racial terrorism. Wilson screened the film Birth of a Nation in the White House. It spurred a national revival of the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan had previously been confined to a handful of southern states. Now it stretched from coast to coast. The Klan became the domestic terrorist arm of the Democratic Party. Wilson was the first progressive president. Progressive here means progress toward the powerful centralized state and away from the American founding. In the Democrats' new plantation scheme, the big house is the White House, and the plantation master is the president.